So like I said, I'm going to just fillet this up and get it in what I would call its dressed form. And I'm doing this real quick, mind you. I've got 2 fillets, skin on the small side. And again, you're not going to get a whole lot of fillets at the grocery store that are much bigger than this. I'm going to take the skin off at this point, and that's when I'm going to switch knives, because that knife will go through the skin. I've got a fish fillet knife with the blade dull enough to not go through the skin, but it's made for that. Take the skin off. And again, people are really leery about taking a fish home from the everyday down the street supermarket and serve it and plan on serving it raw. Well, to show off another neat product that I mentioned earlier, this is kombu. The nice fun thing about kombu is that it has some strange properties when introduced to fish. For instance, mackerel is a very popular fish in sushi bars. And when filleting a mackerel, I have a tendency to break the meat. The actual flesh itself gets torn up. You wet down some of this kombu, this seaweed, and you don't need to reconstitute it. I've got a pan with some water here. I'm just going to set a sheet of it in it, get it wet. If I have a piece of fish that's got rips and tears in it because I didn't fillet it correctly, I can set this in a pan with the kombu on it and refrigerate it. And the kombu heals it. It's unbelievable. I've seen it and done it personally. It actually makes a torn up piece of fish look like it's together again. But for this purpose, I'm going to do something different. To make sure that this is going to be okay to eat raw, I'm going to do a quick cure on it. I've got some sea salt. I have some kosher salt as well, both of which work better than iodized. You want something that's more coarse. I'm going to heavily salt both sides. And you'll see, since I took the skin off, you'll see I want to salt both sides because the skin is off on this. Heavily salt it. I've got the kombu that is now been soaked. I am now going to put the fillets on top of the kombu. And I'm going to leave it just like that. In fact, I'm not even going to wrap it. I'm going to refrigerate it. What is recommended up to about 40 minutes on small fillets, up to an hour to 90 minutes, 60 to 90 minutes on large fillets, to kill any potential hazardous parasites or foodborne illnesses that people are really scared of when it comes to eating raw food. This is a sure, safe way to do it. Now, why the kombu underneath? That is one of the sushi secrets. The kombu underneath not only helps with the healing of the flesh if there's rips and tears in it, but it is now, at this point, introducing a flavor enhancer to the fish in the sense of natural MSG. Kombu is loaded with natural monosodium glutamate, which in small amounts isn't bad for you. It's large amounts it could be. this is introducing a flavor enhancer. So I'm just literally naturally adding MSG larger fillets. I've got salmon right here, for instance. Now, again, referring to what you'll get in the supermarket, sometimes you will find a whole side of salmon, but oftentimes you'll either find it skin on or skin off, cut into fillets. You'll see when I do cut this for sushi, and you'll see when I get into the next fish, fish is cut a little differently for sushi than it is for your traditional steaks or fillets. But I'm going to leave the skin on in this one. And furthermore, I'm going to inspect it to make sure that the pin bones have been taken out if they have not. And in this case, they have. And if you're wondering what the pin bones are all about, you will find them. They lie on the top, right along here, and you will feel them. And in this particular fillet, they've been taken out. Here's a rip and a tear, though, that I was just speaking of. Kombu will definitely help it. So I'm going to get another sheet out. I'm going to get that wet. With this, I'm going to leave the skin on. And in this case, because of the skin being left on, it is a matter of only salting one of the sides. And again, I'm going to salt pretty heavily. Furthermore, I'm going to lay a little bit of that right there on top of that rib. And I'm going to tuck this away. Because it's a larger fillet, this is going to have to be tucked away for about an hour to 90 minutes max. What you'll find, if you forget about it and it cures too long, it forms a pellicle, a tough little layer on top, and it actually begins to cook it. And you could leave it on there overnight or a couple of days, and eventually, depending on the thickness of the fish, eventually it will be cooked, which is defeating the purpose. Because is yellow fin tuna. It's sushi grade. What I didn't mention with the salmon and with the striped bass is any kind of fish grading, because typically it's not done to fish in general, like grading at grade A or grade B. And in this sense, it's not A or B, it's actually grade 1, grade 2. They actually have grade 1 plus and grade 1 minus, and there's different gradations, but nevertheless, it's either going to be grade 1 or grade A. However it ends up being, you want the best that they have. This is yellowfin, which I just mentioned. Its Hawaiian name is ahi, which is how most people recognize it. I am very, very particular when it comes to tuna. Personally, I wanted bluefin tuna to show off for you today, but bluefin is not available right now. So then I went and asked for my second choice. My second choice is actually big eye tuna. Couldn't get any big eye. So I resorted to the yellowfin, but nevertheless, it is sushi grade. And again, I mentioned those three, big eye, bluefin, and yellowfin, for three main reasons. Those are the three types of tuna 99% of the time that sushi bars are serving raw. And there's a darn good reason about it. The potential parasites or bacteria that I'm making sure aren't going to live on those other two pieces of fish don't exist on this by sheer nature. Tuna do not have the capacity of drawing in water into their gills, so they actually have to constantly swim to breathe, and they swim even when they're asleep. Tuna never stop swimming, so therefore tuna do not get microscopic bacteria. They don't have time to collect on the fish. What tuna do get, though, is what you see on the nature shows, and they get parasites. They get other fish and other creatures that live off of them because they're constantly moving. They hitch a ride. There's a big difference when it comes to tuna, the difference between the two. And that is, when you're talking bacteria, you can't see it. When you're talking about a parasite, you'll be able to see it, and it's already off when you get it. So if this had been a loin that had a parasite on it, that's when you get the holes, if you've ever seen it. So steer away from it. In fact, grade A Sushi 1 tuna will not have holes in it for that reason. What it may or may not have is a bloodline, which this has been partially cut off, which fish do not have veins. So they have channels in which the blood runs along. And it's actually this whole side, but it's been cut off. With the exception they left a little here, and they left a little there. So I'm going to go in and trim that little off. And what you'll find, and this is true with any tuna loin, is the top of it is going to be a little more mushy. The bottom of it is going to be a little more fatty. And in the eyes of sushi chefs around the world, it makes a world of difference which part of this I'm serving for what purpose. And for our purposes today, I'm going to cut it up as if we're going to use it all. Whether we do or not, it's yet to be seen. But I mentioned earlier, fish in general gets cut differently for sushi, and it's really for presentation purposes, more or less. It's for a couple of reasons, but most sushi bars have a refrigerated glass case in which they show their fish off. And the glass case has rectangular plates for them to plate it on, because a traditional way of cutting it is into blocks, and they call that a saku block, S-A-K-U, saku. And again, presentation purposes, but it serves a dual purpose in that when you go and cut for sushi, you're going to always want to go against the grain. And if you cut into blocks, it makes it almost a no-brainer as to figure out how to cut it down from there. So again, fillets, what you'll find in the stores, they cut straight down. Boom, there's your fillet. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do a saku block. It's usually 2 or 3 fingers. I'm going to start at the bottom, and because this is a small loin, I'm doing 2 fingers. I'm going to just measure out from the bottom and cut horizontally as straight as I can. There's one piece. I can go 2 fingers again. And what that actually does is lop off the top cap. Again, I mentioned they have different purposes for different pieces. This is the squishiest part. This is the stuff that's going to get served as nigiri. And nigiri is the little ball of rice with the fish on top. That's N-I-G-I-R-I, nigiri. This will get sliced across the grain and served over a little ball of rice. I'm going to take one piece at a time. I'm going to take this middle piece. You can see the grain goes diagonally this way, and then on the side it goes diagonally down. So I take it, I choose one end or the other. I usually choose the fat end. You can choose the tail if you want, it doesn't matter. But on a bias, so I'd say 70-degree angle, not that big of a bias. I'm going to cut straight down. And I'm going to do it at about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch interval, because there is what you call your saku block. All of this tuna that I'm cutting right now is perfect for sashimi, which S-A-S-H-I-M-I Sashimi literally means without rice. So this can be served as just by itself. This bottom part, as I said, is typically fattier. And what I want to point out to you here is you're going to start getting a nice big thick line of fat that goes diagonal through this bottom part. You see that? It's almost marbled. For raw purposes, that's what gets stuck in your teeth. That's what will turn some people off. So if you wanted to cut this up for purely sushi purposes, you've got to cut some of that out. Leaving some of it in is perfectly normal, but you're going to want to cut some of it off. So sushi bars, again, have become ingenious on how to deal with that, and they will eyeball where that fatty part ends, and they cut this off. This gets usually dusted in dusted in black and white sesame seeds. It gets seared off rare, and it gets served what they call tataki style. It can be seared or grilled. Tataki actually means grilled, but you'll see tuna tataki a lot, and that's perfect because the fat in there is not bad fat. It's just not good to eat raw. It gets stuck. It gets stringy. But as soon as you put a little bit of heat to that, it dissolves. And it's perfect for a nice seared rare piece. So this piece gets seared. Now the bottom chunk, if this was a bluefin tuna or a big eye tuna, this bottom chunk would automatically be labeled Toro. And on this piece too, it'd be labeled Toro, but this was such a lean piece. You would know the difference between a fatty piece and a lean piece simply by color. There'll be deeper red on the leaner, be less red, almost pinkish. And if this was really fatty, what the Japanese prize as the best piece of tuna out there, it would be very pale pink. It would be so marbled with that nice fat, and it's the edible fat. That's what makes it different. It's the fat that won't get stuck in your mouth. So this is really typically the choicest piece. Now the last thing I will do before I start assembling, because I gotta start getting around there sometime, is I'm gonna cut this up, because when you do find this at an Asian supermarket, the next question is what the heck am I gonna do with it? And I already told you it's cooked. It's broiled eel. This actually says barbecued eel. And in that sense, it's got, I'm sure the ingredients are listed on it, but I'm sure it's got some sort of hoisin and oyster sauce that's been incorporated on it. And in fact, it's still marinated in it. Quickest and easiest thing to do, some people peel the skin off. It's not necessary. Skin is edible. You'll notice the skin is right there. Skin is edible. I go skin side down and I cut straight down the middle along the line. That's visible for you to use as a guide, to cut straight down the middle. And then again, it's at a severe bias, not a 70-degree bias, but more like a 20, 25-degree bias. You're going to cut, this one wants to fall apart on me. You're going to cut thin slices of it. Now, you can go perpendicular and still go on the bias, but again, that's not the way that's traditionally done. This is the way you will see eel cut 99% of the time. Eel is best served warm. So since this is already cooked, I don't want to cook it again. So again, another little secret that sushi bars have, I've never seen a good sushi bar without one, and that is a little toaster oven or some sort of broiler. because this needs now is just a little flash heat to it. And it doesn't need to be boiling. Just a little flash heat to it, and it will dissolve in your mouth. If you've never tried eel before, I reference it as being a cross between mushroomy and beefy. It's got a little mushroom flavor to me. It's got a little beef flavor to me. It does not taste fishy to me at all. And again, that's my opinion, but I don't taste fish. I don't taste the ocean when I taste eel. Now, of course, it's been marinated, it's cooked already, but this is how you're going to find it. You can find eel raw. It won't be fresh in these markets around here. It will be frozen. It's typically used to make stock. It's also used to make eel sauce, which is a reduced, sweetened eel stock. I see that a lot. So smear just a touch. Now, of course, if you're going to use something like that as your greaser, it's going to change the flavor of your rice. I'm going to have some avocado tasting rice. Again, in this case, that's just fine. Oh, and before I jump in, it helps to have one wet rag and one dry rag. So I'm going to wet one. And I'm going to grab a dry one. I stated earlier that I'm showing what I call half rolls. For those that eat sushi a lot, you'll see there's a big difference in the price between sushi rolls. Some sushi rolls sell as cheap as $4, $5, $6. Other sushi rolls sell more like $12, $14, $15. The difference typically is it rolled with a whole sheet or not? If I roll this all up, it's going to be a big sushi roll. So not only do I show half rolls for economical purposes, you'll get 20 rolls as opposed to 10 out of one package. I also show for purposes of eating, because big rolls tend to be the knife and fork ones, the ones that you can't stick in your mouth in one bite. Doesn't matter the amount. If you want a lot of rice, use a lot of rice. The purpose, though, is you're going to want the rice to be covered. And if you notice what I am doing, I am not squeezing. I am just pushing. It's a push. Refrigerate your rice. It won't only change the texture and the taste, but it's also harder to work with. A cold rice will not spread. It just won't cooperate with you. And this is room temperature now. So I've got it spread. I've got my sesame seeds. If you're going to use sesame seeds, now's the time to do it. So I'm going to use both black and white. Oftentimes you'll find the white is toasted. You can also buy it that way, toasted already. But what you're noticing now is I'm turning it over. With rolls with rice on the inside, you won't want to cover it all. So covering it all, the nori that is, covering the nori with rice is for this purpose only, for rice on the outside. And again, I'm not going to dictate. I'm going to want to make the ingredients even. So if I put the ingredients in like this, any which way, I'm going to have more of it in the center. I'm going to have less of it on the outside. Personally, some people don't care. But again, I'm going to try to be as even as possible. So I'm going to actually cut this up. And do that. Again, mise en place is sitting by, so any extra gets tossed back. That's what gets typically done. I'm going to go for some tuna. What you'll notice now is something that is, again, it usually has to be a variance. Has to be a variance with the local health department, and that is to put vegetables and fish on the same cutting board. Because normally that would be a violation. Normally unrefrigerating this would be a violation, but in these cases it's not. Health departments understand. Health departments know. Plus, we're working with fish that is safe to eat raw. So, I'm left-handed, so this might be a little difficult to do it this way. I'm going to move it over. I'm going to find